here yet, for sure.
All right, I'm ready. I would like to call to order the Urban Renewal Agency meeting with the Economic Development Committee, to order at 6 p.m. We are at full staff as City Council, and we are joined by, it looks like 4 at this time, Economic Development Committee members. We have Carl Fenstermaker, Paul Fidrich, Christine Turner, and Brian Rosenthal. These
Nancy Ward as well.
maybe Sean might show up later. Again, this is an open meeting. You guys, you may ask questions and speak whenever you want. So I'm looking for an approval of agenda, looking for a motion to approve the agenda. By Councilor Santiago, and second.
Second.
Second by Council President Greisen. Any discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public comment. This is where we'll open up to speak. If anybody has any public comment for the Urban Renewal Agency, here's where you can do that. Anybody signed up? Yeah. Okay, we'll close public comment. I'm looking for an approval of minutes for our February 6, 2023 Urban Renewal Agency meeting minutes. Looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
By Councilor Holmes. Any second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hugh. Any discussion? All those in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes. Okay. We are looking at the status of active applications. NJ Johnson.
Good evening, commissioners. So right now at the moment, we have 2 active urban renewal grant applications. One of them, which you all heard a presentation on at the February meeting from CC Pod. What the Urban Renewal Agency discussed is to, since we're in more of a fundamental programmatic look at the Urban Renewal Grant Program, to take a pause on the CC Pod application and come back when the criteria is a little more established. The second outstanding application is related to Healthy Smiles. In the week of March 20th, well, let me back up a sec. At the October 2022 Urban Renewal Agency meeting, Healthy Smiles was awarded a grant of $15,000. This was for their new expansion at another site. And they have since canceled the project and let us know that. So they returned the $15,000 that was awarded to them at that meeting. And we have received a letter where they requested, that they could repurpose the $15,000 that was originally awarded to them for their on-site expansion project. So it would be a little bit of a different, but same applicant and same price that they're requesting. So you'll see in the first letter a bulleted list of a couple options, including but not limited to, that the agency can choose. First is allow Healthy Smiles to use the $15,000 previously awarded to them for the purpose of the newly proposed expansion. The second is have Healthy Smiles return the $15,000 to the agency and allow Healthy Smiles to apply for a new grant. And the third is have Healthy Smiles meet with the agency at the next meeting to discuss their new project before the agency authorizes the use of a new grant. In this case, Healthy Smiles would not have to complete a new grant application. I'll leave it to you all to discuss.
Yes.
I thought in that February 6th meeting, we talked about the grant application coming.
Christine.
Sorry. Do you want me to start all the way over? Having those grant applications coming to the EDC, and the purpose of this particular meeting, April 17th, was to discuss what the agency decides would be the criteria. Is that correct? Just so I'm on the same page.
So we had talked about because this is already an existing application, we wanted to apply the rules that were on the books at the time that they applied, which was in October. So, it's very common land use principle that Peter talks about all the time is you can't change the goals, the goalposts or the process. So what we wanted to do is just have them do the process that was on the books at the time they applied.
Brian Rosenthal. Actually, though, in this case, this would be a new application because it's not even on the same site. So I don't know how you could call this an existing application.
I think that's the question before the agency this evening is if they want to treat it like a new application or let them transfer the funds. That's the question. If the funds transfer, I would say that it's an existing application. If they have to reapply, then I would say that goes through the EDC and goes through the new process.
Right. My point on that is not really EDC or no EDC. It's just if you're physically moving from one physical location to another, I don't see how that could be the same application. You could never in planning say, well, I was going to build a house here, but I'm going to build it there. So it's all good, right? It doesn't work like that. It's a new, and I would assume also you would want to see specifics on what that money was going to be used for and what the need was for. And so in my opinion, it would just be not saying yes or no on the application, but it would be a new application because they're physically moving it. The site, and they don't. And as far as I know, they haven't provided a plan for the new site of what they're doing. Have they?
That's correct.
Yeah. So how can you vote on something if you don't know what you're giving money for?
Counselor or Agent Member McHugh.
I'm not sure, why do we have to go back to the previous guidelines? It seems to me this is a new application and I would probably support whatever they did, but nevertheless, it seems to me they're doing something entirely different. And we might be realigning our goals today at this meeting for that next time they have the opportunity. That might give more clarity to what we would like to see them do. Seems like right now it'd just be giving them $15,000 to, put a sidewalk in somewhere, I don't know, but.
We did want to clarify that this was a request coming from the applicant, or at least a question. They wanted to understand that. But it is kind of the point of the discussion we're having this evening. Do you want to ask them to do a new application, in which case they would go by the new criteria that you are setting? So that is the question.
Yeah,
Do you
I-
want,
yeah.
do you want them essentially kind of grandfathered in on the previous process, or do you want to redo the application? And since that question came in from the applicant, we felt it was only fair to pass it on to the agency. So you can make that decision.
And that's one of the choices on here.
Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
Agent Santiago.
I just vote for a new application.
Same.
Get that feeling. I mean, it is a completely different application. I mean, we have approved the $15,000, and if they were to do that project, that's what that money was earmarked for. If they aren't doing that project, and then, I mean, I'd like to be able to help them, but I think there's nothing there that, we're changing kind of our criteria, our goals. And so I would think a new application would be necessary. I mean, at least for most of us.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, we have a new council, we have a new, way we handle these with you guys looking at them first. So this is a good opportunity to step back on this one and kind of start over on it.
Need a motion?
We looking for a motion then? I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Agent Holmes.
I move to have Healthy Smiles return the $15,000 to the agency and allow Healthy Smiles to apply for a new grant.
We have a motion to have Healthy Smiles turn the $15,000 and allow Healthy Smiles to apply for a new grant. Any seconds?
Second.
Second by Agent Miller. Any more discussion? All those in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. Okay, we're joined today by Scott Vanderboss from Elaine Howard Consulting. We're going to discuss the basics of urban renewal.
Can I just for
Yeah.
the record, really quick, and Jay, can you explain in terms of returning the cash and what that really means in terms of them having it or not having it?
So they returned a check to us for the grant award that was given to them, and we've held on to it, waiting for your decision. And now we're going to cash it and return it back to the city. So the Urban Renewal Agency grant program now has $48,000 effectively.
Thank you for,
Thank you. No, you're good. Scott. You're on.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. If I am not able to share my screen and present myself, which is totally okay, I just got to let you know that the fun bouncy animation that I've had produced for this presentation is not something I'll be able to click through because it makes the file like 200 megabytes, and emailing that to you guys would be a challenge. So I can totally go this way. You just miss out on the animation. And if that is what I need to do, can someone please let me know and I'll just proceed?
You give us just 1 second, Scott.
Yeah. So while you guys are moving around, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what I am going to want to be presenting in this. And I know you guys are high level. You know what urban renewal is, whether or not you know the intricacies and all of that, you have this tool. I want to briefly cover the basic mechanics, why use it, how it's strategically effective and incredibly beneficial for communities to be able to do that and to use the tool.
Scott, you should now be able to share screen yourself.
High
pressure.
It's still giving me the only meeting organizers and presenters can share.
Working on it.
I've actually had the fun experience. I don't know if any of you guys bought new appliances during the pandemic, but I installed my own dishwasher and was smart enough to buy a protection plan for it through Best Buy, and it broke 8 times. And I had all sorts of different technicians and people come out, and eventually they replaced it. It's a great dishwasher. It just apparently has this quirk, and it's known. But each time the technician would say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" Like, "I work as an urban renewal consultant." And they'd look at me and be like, "Well, what's that? How do you renew urban?" You don't. And I tell them, look, what urban renewal is in a nutshell is just this really unique financing tool that's available to cities. And something that most, if not all cities, use very strategically in Oregon. Almost every city that you can think of has an urban renewal area. Now I have the share button. All right, screen, yes. Turn on presenter. So, like I said, what is it? Why use it? And how does it work? And I'd give these guys the rundown of the Villebois urban renewal area in Wilsonville, which is actually where I live. Big urban renewal area, big success story. Used to be greenfield, brownfield, valued at $500,000, had an old insane asylum on it. And now there are over 1,000 houses here, and it's got $550 million of assessed value. And it was all because they were able to strategically use urban renewal to say, if you come and you build in this city planned neighborhood, you build to our specs, we'll give you the first 2 to 2.5 years, depending on where you fit in our program, of property tax revenue once the house is built. And this place went from the brownfield to over 500 houses in 5 years. It was just amazing, and never would have happened without this tool. And that's unique because it's a tool that doesn't impact taxpayers. It impacts other property taxing districts, but it is only the increases in property tax revenue over the amount that was there. In this case, a brownfield, right? So they got, a ton of money each time a house was built, but it didn't impact the current property tax payers. It was something that was an incentive program that was very low risk for the city because they only handed out incentives once the house was already built to the specifications they wanted. Again, not a new tax, and here is my bouncy animation. The way it works, again, is that there's always property tax revenue. It goes to city, county, schools, and property taxes increase each year, independent of urban renewal or any other thing. The assessor can do a 3% appreciation on any property every year. And if there are any substantial improvements, such as building a house, it can be reassessed as well and go above the 3%. What happens in an urban renewal area is that we designate a certain portion of the city. In Wilsonville, it was this just brownfield as an urban renewal area. And instead of having the increases in property tax revenues continue going to the regular taxing districts, those property tax revenues now go to the Urban Renewal Agency and can be used on projects, programs, administration, and all of those things within the urban renewal area boundaries. Fundamentally, that's how it works. Of course, as with any tax law, there is a ton of intricacies and a lot of good questions, and I can go into those after this meeting. That's not the purpose of this right now. You can contact me if you have any questions. This is the basics. An urban renewal area is essentially a new entity that has its own income source, which is TIF revenues or property tax revenues, expenses, projects, programs, administration, and it has a spending limit, which is its maximum indebtedness. And that's the total amount of money that can be used over the life of the area on projects, programs, and administration within that area. In a nutshell, that's how this is going to work. The reason that it is so powerful is because in most situations, the city tax rate can be anywhere from 2 to 5% or $2 to $5 per $1,000. And so if you were to take what the city would get from any new development in an area, it would be that 2 to 5. But if it's in an urban renewal area, you leverage the entire, $10 limit for general government and the $5 limit for schools and education as the amount of increased revenue available for projects in that area, essentially tripling the amount of property tax revenue available to spend if you think of the city as a 2 to 5% and approximate numbers on these other things. The problem is that it's slow because most urban renewal areas start off with something where, yeah, we know we need to do projects in this area. That's why it's an urban renewal area. So we're only going to be getting that 3% at the very beginning here in increment above that initial value of the frozen base, which is the total assessed value before the urban renewal area was formed. Eventually, some areas are lucky, but I typically say I see urban renewal areas at the 5-year and the 10-year mark really start to be able to ramp up on projects because either the development that the urban renewal area was trying to encourage or knew was going to happen, that was going to provide funding happened, or the yearly property tax collections have gotten high enough that they can incur some debt. They start making changes at that point that then increase property tax or the assessed value of the area, which then increase property tax revenues, and it builds. And at the end, you're pulling in quite a bit of money, and you're able to finish these projects. And a lot of urban renewal areas do take out borrowings. They finish their projects, but then they continue collecting tax increment revenues to pay off whatever bonds or formal debt they've taken out. In essence, the big takeaways are there are no new taxes to citizens or property taxpayers or whatever you may refer to that as because of urban renewal. It impacts the other property taxing districts. I have slides in here about schools. We say they're indirectly impacted, and it's really because, in essence, of the state school fund. Again, this is one of those complicated things. Every citizen in a city with an urban renewal area, regardless of whether they live in the area or not, will have urban renewal on their property tax bill. And that is really just because of the way that Oregon property tax law works and the way that the assessors account for urban renewal. It doesn't increase anybody's property tax rates. It's just a math thing to make things work within the current laws. Again, that's complicated, not the purpose of tonight. And I can answer questions on it if that is requested, but I want to get through the rest of my presentation. Lickety split. Again, not new money. Urban renewal impacts other property taxing districts. The property taxing districts continue to receive money off the frozen base. In the case of my neighborhood, the property taxing districts still receive money off of that $500,000 of assessed value that this field was before there were 500, then 1,000 houses on it. And the taxing districts are going to forgo the revenue of all the houses that have been built. But when this urban renewal area expires, they're going to receive essentially that one-time windfall of the difference between $500,000 and $550 million of assessed value. To talk about schools, normal property taxing districts function differently. I think of it almost as a financial entity. I get my money from my property tax revenues, and I directly can spend that, in simple terms, on my projects and the things I need to run my taxing district or whatever activities I do. The school is different. Long and short of it is, the school doesn't directly spend the numeric amount of their property tax revenues. All the property tax revenues are combined to these other sources of revenue for the state school fund, which includes property taxes, general fund, lottery funds, and these other funding sources. And then it goes through the equalization formula, and each district gets an individual per pupil number, and then they multiply that by how many students are in the school district. And that is where local school districts actually get their revenue source. It's from that per pupil number. And urban renewal doesn't impact the per pupil number. It's way further back at that property tax revenues. It's not the only revenue the state schools fund has. And the state school fund makes budgetary decisions based on whatever the general fund has each year. So it's really hard to quantify how schools are impacted by urban renewal unless you say, yeah, they are impacted, it's indirect, and it's hard to describe. Let's see here. We've gone through most of this. Okay, here is a hypothetical property tax bill, and this is just an illustration to show the sort of distribution of or reallocation of revenues from year to year. Let's say that there is $100,000 property value, and it gets put into an urban renewal area. The next year, there's a 3% growth. It's $103,000 in value now. Each taxing district would receive a small bump from one year to the next. However, if it was put in the urban renewal area, the taxing districts would receive the same exact amount as the year prior, but there's that little line item there that says $39.31. And that is where how we say this isn't impacting property taxpayers, it's impacting these taxing districts, because if there was no urban renewal, all that money is going to the taxing districts. It's not going back to property taxpayers. Yep. Now I would say I can open it up to questions, and I can talk about more specific things that might be interesting to, I was talking to my wife earlier. I was like, I have to give presentations to people who are impacted by urban renewal, people who live inside the city. And then there is the difference between that and presenting to people who are policymakers or who run these programs. It's a different thing. There's how it works, and then there's strategy or other things that might want to be discussed. So are there any questions on the basic workings, or any questions that are just rumbling around?
Brian Rosenthal. One clarification, this came up when we were first kind of putting together the program for the urban renewal district, and you didn't quite say it the way I think it should be said. There is a direct impact to the taxpayers. The direct impact is if you have a fire district, a library district, a vector district like we do, if they don't receive additional funds from taxes over the years and get that inflationary bump, they still have, their budgets still have to go up. So when they come out and they do a request for a levy, that levy is going to be higher mill rate for the people that are paying the tax, because the fact that let's say we develop the airport or what have you, there's going to be a need for services. Those services have to be paid for somebody. It's not like you can just say, well, we had one fire truck for every 2,000 houses, and now we have 3,000 houses, and we're just going to keep it at one fire truck. So there is a cost. It's not tremendous, but it is there, and it's good to understand that, because otherwise, when people start waving their tax bills at you, and you start telling them that there's no cost to you, that's not quite true. It's not direct cost. It's an indirect cost, and it's over time. But it's good to
Yeah,
understand.
I would say that it is an indirect cost. It doesn't directly impact them. You're absolutely right. As the years go by and things happen, there are needs for increased funds for property taxing districts. And that gets into sort of that fuzzy area of, again, can you say that the urban renewal area directly caused any increase that is substantially quantifiable between the amount that maybe went out for in a levy or a bond before and after? We can't say that. What we can say is that, yeah, we're impacting the taxing districts. And if they're telling the taxing districts in turn say, we need more money, that's a policy decision and it happens. Absolutely. And so, again, indirect as in 2 steps away, but it's not a direct impact on the property taxpayers. It is an impact eventually.
Agent Miller.
Scott, for context, we have parts of Vernonia, parts of Claskenai, parts of Rainier already in compression. And Scappoose is about, I believe, 47 cents or so away from compression. I know that bonds don't affect compression, levies do, and we have quite a few special districts in this county. So, and they all have operating levies. How does urban renewal interact with compression, or what's the relationship there, if anything?
So urban renewal does interact with compression, and it is so complicated that we have, I believe, an article on our website that is, how does urban renewal impact compression, or compression impact urban renewal? Because it is, again, something that this article or FAQ or whatever we have posted, we've run by multiple assessors, multiple people in city administrations, because it's very complicated. And to be perfectly honest, off the top of my head, I do not have an explanation for you. I would have to type up an explanation and send it out to you guys.
Okay, and I don't think a lot of people understand what compression is. You're fully aware of what compression is, right? Are you able to explain it in simple terms so everybody in the room can understand what compression is with the $10 limit and how it pushes down if it goes over $10?
You know, the only thing I can't explain the direct mechanism of compression, because I'm not a financial specialist. We have a subcontractor that does that. I do tons of conglomerations of data, and I see different districts with different compression amounts. And I know that it is an impact of varying tax rates, but I'm not the person to explain compression. And it is most certainly not an urban renewal 101-y big high level thing. It's a very important concern. And I don't want to give you an answer that is me pulling an answer from nowhere. I'm not the person to give that answer. I apologize.
Okay, in that case, because there is a relationship in between urban renewal and compression, we would probably want to know what that relationship is before we make any sort of decision, just so that we can get informed on this.
Decision based on what you want your storefront programs to do, or what your area should do?
We're already got urban renewal district going, so we're already in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I should clarify, I think it's just a good point of information for council to have on urban renewal in general. Sorry.
It's just at this point, if you have a district and you're collecting TIF revenues, The only thing that could impact compression is beyond the scope of what the goals and objectives of a storefront program would be. That's really whether or not there is an area, or are we going to try and share revenue to bring down the amount that we're collecting? And again, that's not in the scope of all of this. And there is an article we have on our website, and I have access to Nick Popanook of Tiberius Solution, who is the expert on everything financial and tax law due to urban renewal.
All right, thank you. What, is there a time limit? How long is the urban renewal district? Is it indefinite or is there a 10-year?
There
30 years.
used to be time limits, but that was before the policies shifted such that laws were established that the real absolute end all be all of when an area terminates is when the maximum indebtedness is reached or spent. And that's really because if you say I'm going to run an urban renewal area for 30 years and you take out a certain amount of formal debt, which is equal to your maximum indebtedness, but after 30 years, TIF revenues or property tax revenues haven't gotten to the point where you can pay off the debt that was your maximum indebtedness, what do you do then? And so most people run urban renewal areas on their formal debt. I take out this amount, and once I take out $50 million in bonds, we know that until those bonds are paid off, we can't spend any more. And so the area runs until the debt is paid off, but the urban renewal area can't spend any more money on projects. They just are paying off debt.
Typically, we haven't even talked about taking on debt, have we? We've just talked about spending the money that we're earning or.
Right. So until we have major projects or enough of the 3% accumulated to do bond and indebtedness, then we wouldn't be trying to bond anything, because otherwise we would need to do full faith and credit bonds. So we would be saying that it's the city's basically general fund would need to cover this, and that's not a position we want to put the city in.
Brian Rosenthal, we discussed this a fair bit in our committee when we were talking about all this originally. We were pretty strongly against major indebtedness because it creates a liability for the city. What basically the guarantor of the debt is ultimately the city, because the district is not going to have a credit rating that's going to get it the best interest rate. So if the district cannot pay, it's going to fall back on the city. And so we did not want to see the city get into a situation where suddenly we're cutting fire and police services because we had a grand scheme and it didn't work out the way we thought it would because there was a recession or a miscalculation. As far as the compression, and I'll say it simply, I'm not obviously a tax specialist, but it's a limit on levies and such. And so what happens is if you get too much, then everything gets reduced by a percentage to keep it within that. And so it's fairly complicated. I don't think for our discussion on these grants, it's too important for this. For the small grant stuff, that's more big picture, big stuff, not grants of $1,000 to $30,000 kind of stuff.
But we do need to go in mindset that, the fire might need to do a levy because they're losing out on this other income. So then that would affect our compression.
Yeah, the old fire chief that retired actually showed up at several of our meetings and talked about his concerns about the impacts on his fire district.
I think that kind of leads into then maybe once we decide these fundamental goals that we want to achieve, then that would maybe show us, like you said, we're not really looking for these big indebtedness projects. We're looking more storefronts, aesthetics, using the money that we have. So is there any more questions for Scott before we move on? Are you going to stick around in the next?
I did want to say though, because fire districts are, I know well the fire district, and Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue is incredibly well run, and they actually have produced a document that's a best practices for urban renewal and fire districts. And I've worked closely with people there. Elaine's worked closely with people there, and it's not that fire and rescue or fire districts are, ultimately always opposed to urban renewal. It's no, TVF&R has made it plain that we support urban renewal in these types of projects, these things, and they list it out. And essentially, it is projects that are going to increase assessed value and livability, and not clock towers and other things of the like that aren't going to give anything back to a fire district once it's done. Right? There's a difference between doing improvements that cause the assessed value of an entire downtown to improve, and when the urban renewal area is over, the fire district then receives increased revenue, or doing projects that are on properties that ultimately become exempt and do not provide tax dollars and give nothing back. It's a very good and well put together document. And if that's a concern, I would suggest going to the TVF&R website or searching TVF&R and urban renewal best practices, because they did a great job on it.
Thank you. If you do want to stick around, you have dealt with a lot of the urban renewal, so there might be questions on what other cities, what other areas are kind of using their monies for.
I can do that.
But are we ready to move on to we want to determine our criteria, our options for how we want to use this money. And Peter.
Just to clarify something, if there's a new building that absolutely impacts, if it's painting the exterior of a building that doesn't impact the assessed value, that building, unless there's a major alteration to it, would just continue to go up 3%. So oftentimes we think that they'd reassess buildings depending on aesthetics. They don't. It's stuck in 1985 plus 3% a year. It's practically speaking how it works, unless there's a new building. And then to bring it back to TVF&R, who I have also worked with on urban renewal issues, one of the original ones was Intel's campus, which was a failed subdivision called Romler Acres. They paid for the bonded indebtedness, essentially. Hillsborough promised TVF&R that as soon as the bonds were paid, they would shut down the district, which they did in year 9.5. And then all the money came to TVF&R. So they do have strong criteria. They're able to weigh in with different jurisdictions on whether they support projects or not, and those jurisdictions have agreed to put that in the voter pamphlet statements. It compared to CCFD1, which is Clackamas County's, where they had lost a lot of money because the Clackamas County Commissioners kept re-upping on the Clackamas Town Center. And Clackamas County Commission no longer has the ability to use urban renewal because one jurisdiction, at least the guys of fire and the voters, had used it very responsibly, and the other jurisdiction had not.
So moving on to the fundamental goals, are you presenting? You want to go over those?
Yeah. So one thing I want to mention first before getting into the specifics of the options is that this will probably be a 2-meeting process where we identify 1 or 2 fundamental options that you all like and want the grant program to reflect. And then we as staff are going to come back with a little bit more of a, structured and detailed version of what that could look like procedurally and in terms of written criteria, if that's something that you all want to see. So getting into it, the first option is further increasing the tax increment, where the agency would award projects with a primary focus of grants that are expected to increase the tax increment. This would increase the rate that urban renewal funds are collected and also allow the district to sunset sooner. It would also increase the tax increment, which would provide more revenue to the organizations that are in the taxing district. Challenges being, though, that it's a pretty inexact science, and we are not expecting to have assessor expertise on hand when you all make these decisions. And then another challenge is that property taxes or property tax value increasing for that one property owner does mean that they alone will pay an increase in property tax if it's a substantial enough increase beyond the 3%. So for that, you're talking big projects that we're not at scope to do quite yet. Option 2 is advancing exterior beautification. For the agency would award grants with a primary focus of advancing the visible aesthetics and beauty of businesses to make the district more visually attractive. This would help create really like a downtown feel in Scappoose, potentially contribute to some of the branding that's gone on in conversations before. We might also see an increase in tourism because, again, of that identity, you know, Scappoose having a look and feel that people connect with. Challenges, as Peter just mentioned, though, are that exterior improvements are not expected to substantially increase the tax increment. Option 3 would be assisting with interior structural improvements. So this is somewhat similar to, or somewhat opposite, I guess, to the advancing exterior beautification. The key with this, though, is that it would have to be on interior improvements that stay with the building forever. So it's not typically best practice, and there are even questions about the legality of it if you can use it for capital or equipment purchases, even if it assists business is within the district. The advantages are that it improves the overall building quality of businesses in the district and improves the financial condition because they have some assistance on some of these projects. Challenges are that the impacts of the awards are not visually evident. So, you know, looking around, you're not necessarily going to see, just walking around the outside, the impacts of the urban renewal program. And then another one would be that, like I mentioned, that you all would be limited to only structural improvements that stay with the building for its lifetime. And then option 4, financing large projects where the agency will award grants with a primary focus on larger projects in the future. Depending on how you all apply this, this may result in withholding funds for quite a bit of time while the regular contribution to the Urban Renewal Grant Program builds up. The advantages, we talked a lot about visibility. Larger projects often are more visible and increase the credibility and satisfaction of the Urban Renewal Program. Larger projects also typically have a bigger role in increasing the tax increment versus some of the smaller ones. So the idea is you hold on to the money a little bit longer and then you potentially get a bigger payoff. One challenge, though, is that within the business community, that withholding it for year after year might, again, not ruin, but damage the reputation of the grant program. If, you know, people are applying for grants and no one's getting awarded grants.
I have one question. From my understanding, that if you do like a major remodel and it's a big remodel, so it changes the assessed value. So the 3% doesn't exist. They move it up to 10%. Where does their baseline then go for the urban renewal? Does it start back at 0 then and then goes up the next year?
No, so how it would work is that after let's say you doubled the size of the building or something, then the assessor would come in, they would assess it, it would jump up to that new value, and then it statutorily, the 3% will be on top of that.
That year you wouldn't get anything.
No, you would, because they have to pay property taxes on the new structure.
Okay.
So normally the city share would go into the city's general fund and you could use it for whatever you want. With urban renewal, you're not just getting the city share, you're getting the fire district share too. You're getting the other special districts. The school districts things are very confusing. It's all pooled at the state, so we're not taking 40 cents out of the school district's pocket or what have you. But then once you have the new value on that property, it statutorily goes up 3% per year, unless it goes up less than 3%, which the assessor would need to do that. So that would be like during the housing crash, people's assessments the assessed value actually went down. So that you're capturing everyone's money until whatever you've decided to fund using the urban renewal is paid off. At which point then the idea is then they would get much more money because it's kind of a delayed gratification. Like they're giving up this 3% a year. But if you get some $400 million worth of assessed value, when they get the increment back, it's much larger.
So, Christine, do I have to announce myself? Okay. So when we talked about urban renewal, oh, how many years ago, like the intention that our committee had was it would benefit the citizens, it would benefit everyone from an exterior standpoint. That's what we talked about. We talked about, providing whether a $2,000 matching grant or a grant for outside improvement, but something that would beautify Scappoose and again, be the benefit for all of us, not just a particular business, but everyone in Scappoose. That's what we kind of talked about. And we also talked about primarily improving that sin row from Wigwam to the pet store, kind of trying to get that to be a little bit more lively, less lively, maybe less colorful.
One of the things we talked about in the breakdown, we talked about in the short term, because there wouldn't be a ton of money, that we were going to go primarily for beautification because that's going to be cheaper. It's not going to be big grants. Then down the road, when there was more money available, then we could look at larger projects. The idea also behind the beautification was not just to make it nicer for citizens. There was a business angle to it. We know we have a little bit of an image problem here. We all love our city, but we'd like to look a little nicer. And people coming to town that don't know Scappoose, we want to give them a good image so that they want to do business here. And so maybe they're thinking about going out to the airport or setting up a hotel or whatever. We want to give them an image that this is a place they want to do business, a place that we know that our incomes here are above state average, but it doesn't necessarily look that way. And so we're trying to, the idea was that if we could improve our image, that would have a business impact that might help development throughout the area. So it was partly for the benefit of our own citizens directly, but indirectly benefit of business and the citizens by having an improved appearance, which could facilitate properly better business growth and development.
So my thought is, the grant is given, especially a low amount. You're talking a micro, grant here. You're not talking tens and thousands. I mean, even we have top right now 48,000. Right. So the idea is to serve as many businesses as possible. You keep saying benefit. But I think when a grant is given, it is impact. What kind of impact does that money give that business? Does it help them, grow their get more business, a different type of business, bring in more customers, hire more people? That's how I see how the money can make an impact. Beautification is great, but then is it a beautification grant or is it a business grant?
I don't think the purpose is for that. Like, I mean, let's just use the coffee shop with their espresso machine, just as an example. It goes to number 3, we're giving capital equipment that does not stay permanently with the building. That doesn't benefit. Yeah, it makes Cathedral better, but not everybody in Scappoose goes to Cathedral. So we've only given urban renewal, which again is for the community, it's not a business loan, it's business for the sake of the community.
Right. And that's where I think we should be supporting is our local businesses, right? So they can grow and then they can serve our community. So how are we supporting our small businesses? And that's how I think my opinion, how the money should be allocated is how does that money going to make an impact on that particular business so then they can serve our community or they can hire more people, they can grow, etc.
Chair, yeah.
Yes. Scott.
So the discussion has reminded me a ton of the Fort George Brewery in Astoria. I don't know if anyone is familiar with that project, but it is right now one of the main attractions in the Astoria downtown. And the amount of money that it brings in and the tourists that it brings in is incredible. they are one of the great urban renewal success stories in that not only were they able to leverage urban renewal funding, but they were able to get grants from the state. But the Fort George Brewery, that building that they're in, and I I think I have pictures, you can search it on the internet. It used to be a derelict body shop, literally broken windows. Like you looked at it and you were like, I bet that is not a safe place to go in. And now it is this business that is employing people not only in the brewery but the restaurant, and it's almost a whole city block now. And that wouldn't have been possible without not only the exterior improvements, but there was funding used to help them fix interior and buy equipment to be able to set up the restaurant in there. And so there's an argument to be made both ways where you want to use the money. And it's a strategic decision based on the agency and economic development committee's discretion as to whether that improvement, that particular interior or capital improvement is something like, oh, well, it's going to add 30 new jobs, Fort George Brewery, or is it something that, no, that's not something we want urban renewal to pay for. So I just wanted to say there is a case for certain interior improvements and things and big time success stories in towns that are not large population. So
Do you know
just
how
wanna throw
much
that in
they
there.
were awarded or how long that took? I mean,
I have it in a PowerPoint and I can type it in chat. I don't want to take up the rest of the meeting.
that's fine. I'm
I
just trying to
will
get an
give
idea of
you.
how long some of these
They
take.
had, I know it was over $100,000 worth of total. I think urban renewal was more in the single to 10-ish range. But it's really easy for me to find out, and I'll type it in chat if you guys want. But I'll let you continue what you want to do.
I don't know if we're giving you much direction for next meeting. Go, Paul.
So Jeanette, beautification isn't just aesthetics. It can help drive business. So Sandy, which I've mentioned a lot around the branding project, they create an aesthetic, Sandy style, but they also give, they have, one of the things that they strive for is outdoor dining, because they want people driving through their town to see that that people are outside eating and having a good time and whatever. So some of their urban renewals goes toward, for instance, an outdoor dining area that has an aesthetic that is they call Sandy style. Now, for instance, we have a establishment over here with an army tent outside. That's their current aesthetic, but an urban renewal might be a nice structure that when you drive by, you might say, boy, there looks like a nice place to have a beer or something. So it's the aesthetic thing is not just about paint and making things yellow, but it also is hopefully to increase the business and help spur more development in neighboring areas.
Yes, Agent Grayson.
I couldn't agree with you more. And sadly, as a family, we eat out or go to other places and we think, gosh, we wish we had this at home, right? We don't want to go somewhere else, or wouldn't be, Fultono's is out of the urban renewal, but if they just had something outside, right? And I actually, since the branding presentation that you gave us, I've talked to handfuls of people that have lived here for a long, long time, and either they left or they've come back or they've just stayed. And I asked them about our community, and 100% of the time the word was ugly. And like I chose to come back. I grew up here. So there's obviously more at the heart of this town than how it looks, right? Which is something to be said. We have our motto we came up with a handful of years ago, small town, big community, because we do have that close knit kind of a family feel. But we want to feel good about driving up and down the street and noticing these things. So it's not that I'm not in favor of other projects, but I know that when this first was presented to us as a council a number of years ago, it was the fact that we could drive down the highway and just look at that mess that we see across the way and make it look and feel so much more inviting.
Right.
And that's why I'm excited about this opportunity. I hope that we can make that happen. I know that even EDC had said, well, as soon as this kind of might be the direction, not that we're gonna like, tape the letter on the door, but we're willing to go knock over there and,
I'll knock.
yeah, like
I'll knock.
give them some suggestions or encourage them to apply for
It's an
things.
opportunity for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And if they don't know what that looks like, then we're happy to help give them ideas.
Right. As I brought our hotel developers through the town,
Yikes.
we're worthy. Promise.
A couple of things I would like clarification on for criteria. So one thing I'd like to see is that we do not give money for design phase of any project. And the reason is if somebody's got no skin in the game, they always have big ideas. And so if we're giving money for design, then that money, I know one argument is it's seed money and it can get the project going, but if they don't have the resources to pay for their own design, it's probably not going anywhere. So I would like that to be part of our criteria, that we don't do any design grants, because, at least at this time. I mean, down the road when there's a lot more money, because this thing does have kind of an exponential growth pattern where there's more money. The other things I'd like to see is that grants in excess of $5,000 that we ask for matching, meaning, let's say we agree to help redo the wigwam, right? We'd like to see them participate in it. Again, people don't have skin in the game. So now we help them build this nice new thing, but are they going to maintain it? Probably not unless they have an investment of their own in it. And so a great example I use from my own business is when I give people free carpet, the carpet's trashed in 3 years. When they pay for the carpet or part of the carpet, it's good forever because they clean it, they vacuum it, they take care of it because they have ownership. And so the idea here also is that we want to give them seed money to increase the beauty of their property and the viability of their business, but to put them in a position where they can then see, oh my God, this is beneficial to me. I have more business. It feels better to come to work, et cetera. And then they have ownership, and then they'll perpetuate it so that next time they need their building painted in 10 years, they're not coming back to you looking for another grant to paint it every 10 years because they see the value for themselves just to do it.
Okay, looks like we're up against it. Do you have enough information to come back? I agree, listening to EDC and kind of my feelings too, is I think that's where we might get our best bang for our buck for being here over 40 years, driving through town. I think we can do a lot of good with not a lot of money. So I'd like to focus on that, but then also have that ability to make some big changes if, down the road as the funds get there, that we can look at some of the bigger projects. But the artwork, we want to max out, look at matching. Otherwise, it's a lower grant amount type of option.
Yeah, I was hoping that what we do is we do up to 5,000 without matching, and anything over 5 they have to match. It would be, and I'd also like to see. I know we have a fair bit of money in the fund right now, but I'd like to see. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to spend it all immediately. I'd like to see a cap in the short run of 25,000, and then that can be raised at a later date. But just because we have something we want to fund today doesn't mean something just as good is going to come along tomorrow. And if we spend our money, then we have nothing. So, and we're waiting for funds to fund it. I know we're out of time. Thank you.
But we will move forward. EDC will be getting all the applications first. We'll see them at the same time, but you guys will get together and meet and go over them and give a recommendation to council agency.
You guys thinking a year-wide application period to be open, or is it just a certain time period? Is that when?
I think if city receives an application, it comes to us and your next session, you review that. You review the application.
Good?
Yes, thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
I did find that PowerPoint page. If you want me to share real quick before I leave, it's got a before and after picture and the stats on the Fort George Brewery, if you're interested. Would you like me to share my screen?
Email it to me, Scott.
You got it, bud.
Thank you. Thank you
All
for
right.
being here.
Yeah, no problem. See ya.